Well, hello everybody. Man, I like this shirt, but it kind of makes me look droopy. See, this looks a little bit more normal, but just upright, I don't know, it looks droopy to me. Maybe I made a bad decision. Also, let my shoulders slump. I don't know. Fresh out of bed, I'm going to the store because I need some caffeine because I haven't had caffeine in a day and a half. I'm not having as much caffeine as I used to, but enough to where if you go forever without having it, I just had a headache all night. But it is pleasant. I can't remember the last time I willingly went outside with just one layer on. While it's not the day that this is going to be posted, the day that I am recording this, it's January 25th, 2020. January. And it's almost 60 degrees outside. It's the warmest day we've had since probably early November. Well, I want to say the first half of November was pretty nice, but it's real nice outside. It's warm, it's welcoming. The wind, it's been windy as hell, and the wind has died down a bit. It's a little bit bright though, for my tastes. That being said, this reminds me of one moment in particular. It would be December 12th, 1995. The day of the infamous, while it would ultimately be kind of overshadowed by the flood of 96 that happened a couple months later. The windstorm of 1995.
This is a major storm just developing, and it is heading our way.
This may be the meat of the storm. We are seeing winds gusting up to 90 miles an hour. We have torrential rain coming down, power lines going down all over the town of Newport, and it does appear that it's happening right now in terms of the real seriousness of this storm.
And look at those arcing, Julie, and listen to that noise as that arcs.
Oh my God.
Boy, they're going down like 10 pins around here.
Residents must manage without necessities of life. No power, no water, no roof over their head.
No, we have no water, no power. I have no phone, no nothing.
Tonight, the Northwest is heading down the road to recovery from the big storm.
So again, while the flood of 96 is more remembered for that 95-96 winter in the Portland area, in terms of the effects it had on people, the damage it did. It was a flood that lingered for several days, caused extensive property damage, not just in the Portland area, but all over the place. So that's a little bit more remembered in terms of major winter events, but that winter was terrible. We actually had at least 3 significant windstorms, but 2 of them were just kind of, good-sized windstorms, 40, 50 mile an hour winds, gusts to 70, good, storms, but nothing like the one that would befall us on December 12th, 1995. And I'm going to be showing clips. There's actually some news footage of this event to be found online. So I'll be playing that intermittently with this video, because this event, much more so than the flood of 96, we lived actually pretty close to the Willamette River, but straight uphill to our place, so the floods never even came close to affecting us. So again, for me personally, flood of 96 wasn't the grandeur of the issue is almost always predicated on how much it affected you personally. And the flood of 96 didn't affect me and my family at all. It affected my cousin and his family a little bit. They lived a lower elevation, a little closer to the river, but I just recall the windstorm so much better. This was the first real emotional and long-term trauma that I ever experienced from one event in my life. And it stayed with me for about a year and a half. It was this crippling fear of the wind and what it was capable of that came in the aftermath of this windstorm. So I thought I'd bring you that story. Again, with images and footage to go with it, just to show you what this thing did. Because we knew it was coming, and they were reporting that it could potentially be worse than the Columbus Day storm of 1962, which just ripped Portland in half. I still think in the end the Columbus Day storm did more damage, but at the same time, you know, you're comparing early 60s with mid 90s, two completely different eras. But yeah, it seems like in the end the Columbus Day storm still won out. But hey, I wasn't around yet, so I don't have any traumas from that event. But I remember we went out for recess. It's about 2.5, 3 hours before the storm, and the weather was just like this. It was a little overcast, but mostly clear, barely any wind. It was so calm. And I'm like, of course, I didn't really understand the concept of the calm before the storm, which is a real thing. And so I thought, hey, maybe the storm's gonna miss us. This looks like some pretty welcoming weather. But I was wrong. And I remember we were going to be released from class at like 2 o'clock. You know, usually we had school till like closer to 3, but the storm was coming. That quickly got changed to 1 o'clock because the storm was getting here a little sooner than planned. And I remember looking out my 4th grade classroom, and you were looking out on the Oak Grove Boulevard, the main drag, and there was a massive pine tree off in the distance. And we were just sitting on the floor. I don't know if our teacher thought that would keep us calm. And just with the way, like, I wasn't really scared yet, but with the way other people were behaving, it made me think like something bad's gonna happen. What the hell? I had no idea what was awaiting me. And I remember looking out the window at this tree, and it was just sitting there. And in a matter of minutes, it started moving. And then it started really moving. It was like in seconds, it went from this to like pretty solid wind gusts. And finally our teacher was like, you know what, no, we need to get you out of here now. Now I lived, literally the school's here, and there's an intersection right here. I lived 4 places down from my school. You could literally see my elementary school from my parents' bedroom. I lived that close. But my mom was at work, my dad was at work, my mom's friend Lori, who was always just kind of coming and going, she was staying at our place. She'd been there like most of the summer, and she kind of just, you know, she never really found any stability in her life over this period of time, so she was always kind of coming and going. And during this time, she was staying with us. So she was at home. So I knew when I got home, it was just gonna be me and her. So I get out of school. The moment I step out the door, the wind hits me, and I'm getting like blown, and I'm seeing the trees sway. And when you know the wind is that strong, and you live in an area with a lot of trees, there's just that like sound happening. It scared the shit out of me the moment I stepped outside. And I start, you know, again, you know, it's only going to take me a minute or two to get home, but I start running, and I get into the driveway. Now, we lived in a duplex, you know, 2 long buildings next to each other, and then just a long parking lot in front of them. There was a few pine trees in the yard. So as I'm beelining it across the parking lot, or the driveway, to, you know, make the quickest direct beeline to my front door as possible, this big branch rips out of a tree, you know, about that big around, like being a kid who had just turned 10, like if this would have hit me over the head, it probably would have knocked me out. I mean, it probably would have knocked an adult out. But me, little kid me, definitely. And this branch came ripping out of the tree, and it literally was like whoosh, right in front of me. I watched it like crash land on the ground right in front of me, and I like stumbled to a stop. And that was when I was finally officially scared. Was when I almost got my head caved in by a big branch. And I run up to the door, bang, 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 bang. I don't remember if it was locked or not, and I get into the house, and immediately I'm frantic. That was the trigger. And my mom's friend is sitting there and she's chill. She's like, oh, and she's like on the phone with my mom, and I'm freaking out, like, how am I gonna survive this? The storm just started. And my mom calls because she wants to check in on us. My mom is at work in Selwood. You know, she's probably about 8 miles away. She keeps trying to get her boss, who was just this really ditzy Mary Tyler Moore looking chick.
And here's a
And my
picture
mom's
of
like,
Izzy's
the
restaurant.
storm's already
The
coming
very
in
top
here.
of that is,
Now, mind
what
you, my
blew
mom,
off.
the place my mom worked at was open till 5 p.m. on a regular day. And here we are, it's, you know, a little after 1.
I'm kind of concerned.
And
when we had the
storm's here.
Columbus
And my
Day
mom's
storm,
like,
there
we
was
need to
power
close
outages
down.
for 5 to
And
7
she's just
days.
like, oh, no,
Television
you
was
don't need to
virtually
do that.
useless
It's not
because
that
of
big
that.
of a
So
storm.
I'm wondering what's going to happen in the days ahead.
So my mom's just like, God, you son of a bitch. Okay. And she's kind of just sticking it out, you know, because her boss won't let her. Of course, her boss wasn't working that day, so it was easy for her boss to be like, well, I'm fine, so what are you complaining about? That's literally how she talked, by the way. It's not really, I'm not that far off in my impersonation. And so she's calling to check up. I run into my room. I pull this little pad I had on top of my main mattress and box spring and put it down sideways and just curl up under there. I'm trying to hide and secure myself from the storm, and the worst wind gusts were in that first hour, so no matter where I hid, I could hear it just going. And there was a few gusts that were right up around 100 miles an hour. I know various parts of Portland hit or broke 100-mile-an-hour gusts, so the first, especially the first 10 minutes, I remember there were several gusts that, looking out the window at these big tall trees, it was like in a cartoon where trees would just bend over completely and flop sideways in the wind. It was insane. And so I'm already frantic. I'm already scared. I already think I'm gonna die. I'm a 10-year-old and I think I'm gonna die. Starting to wonder why this event traumatized me so much. And then the power goes out. So my mom's friend, still being chill, even though I think she was getting a little scared, she's talking to my mom, she's like, oh, well, the power just went out, ha ha ha. And my mom's like, okay, I want to talk to Stephen. Her friend hands me the phone, she's like, hi honey, how you doing? And I'm like, Mom, I need to save myself. I don't really remember saying that, but she remembers that very well, me saying, I need to save myself, I'm gonna die. And finally, I get the phone back to my mom's friend. And within a minute, all of the sudden, there's this, and the whole apartment shook. I'm talking 7.8.0 earthquake for a couple seconds. The whole, when you see in films, when they're trying to imitate an earthquake and they just sway the camera back and forth and everything kind of blurs for a second. That was what happened with my vision for these few seconds. And I didn't know what had happened, but there was this massive crash and everything shaking. And I'm seeing visions of the world, just the ground around my apartment caving in, like Armageddon type shit. And I run, because I look out the front window and everything's the same, trees flopping in the wind. And my mom's friend starts flipping shit on the phone because she doesn't know what happened, but she's like, oh my God, things are breaking and shaking. And my mom finally was like, okay, fuck this, I'm coming home right now. She hangs up, she calls her boss and says, my son's scared out of his mind, it's insanity out there, I don't care if you fire me, I'm going home. And she bailed, and she literally, I don't know how she got home with all the limbs dropping, all the traffic. She somehow managed to get herself home, but as that was happening, I run to the back door because I'm like, I gotta find out what's happening and why does it look so normal out front. There was a massive pine tree. I'm talking, I don't know, 10, 12 feet wide that was kind of bisected our backyard. We were Unit 1 with Unit 2. And the wind had gotten so powerful that it just ripped this big tree out by its roots. and it essentially grabbed it and just threw it down onto our apartment. And mind you, this was a pretty cheap, run-of-the-mill apartment complex. It wasn't very well maintained. With the power of the wind and the size of this tree, it should have ripped right through, pretty much ripped into Unit 2 next to us, because that was kind of the angle it was falling at. And that was the, the crash and the gyrations we felt. It was from this massive tree landing on our apartment. And the reason it didn't rip right through, in fact, it actually caused minimal damage. There was a wisteria tree that was in the courtyard between our 3 apartments, and there was the 3 apartments on the other side of the courtyard. And this tree, because it landed sideways across the apartment, it was so tall that the top of the tree managed to land against this wisteria tree. And the wisteria tree, it was shaped like a tuning fork. It was one big trunk, and then one big branch went out this way and another big branch went out that way. And it essentially, in that middle place, caught this tree. It fell at the perfect angle. And the wisteria tree, in catching it, actually, that was what handled most of the weight of the tree, so that there was limited weight actually weighing down on the apartment. And aside from my experiences, one of the most tragic things was there was a woman, from what I remember, obviously don't remember her that well, but there was a woman that lived next door to us. Seemed to be a pretty nice gal, run-of-the-mill person, and she was in her kitchen, I don't know, preparing food, she was in her kitchen, and the kitchens were always to the back. So, if she looked out her glass door, there's the big tree right there, and she said that she looked up right as that tree started falling. And, life flashes before your eyes. She thought she was going to get crushed to death. And the tree comes right at her and then just stops. And you're like, what the hell? So the wisteria tree probably saved her life that day. But my mom said, she eventually moved out. My mom said she bumped into her a couple years later. It's a little later on down the road. And of course, granted, we didn't know this woman all that well. But she seemed normal, stable. And my mom said that when she saw her a few years later, she looked like she could just tell by looking at her mannerisms that she had a really bad drug addiction of some kind. And, we pondered whether that event triggered something, or, obviously we can't know for certain, but, it is of interest that after this, what would be a pretty traumatizing experience, even though on the flip side, you think, I could have died that day and my life was spared. Maybe I should do something good with my life now that I still have it. It seems like she might have gone the other way. Granted, she may have already been doing that and we just didn't know. But I see that tree laying on the side of the house, and I'm thinking all the other trees are coming down. And my mom's jackass friend, her big concern now becomes, because there's trees, again, in the driveway, she becomes concerned about her car. And so she decides to leave the apartment, leave me in the apartment alone, so she can go move her freaking car, which already is dangerous in this storm, but then she leaves me there traumatized all by myself, which I think later on became a major place of contention with my mom. She was not happy about that. And so I go to the door, because I don't know what to freaking do. I'm 10 years old and I think I'm gonna die. And my friend Megan, who lived right across from us, her mom and them, they all see me like standing in the doorway like, and her mom, who, by the way, my friend Megan's mom was a total bitch, but in this moment she went full mom and was like, honey, are you there all alone? And I'm like, can I come over there? And they were like, oh, yeah, come over. And I think for a moment they thought I was there all alone. I'm wondering, because my mom's friend, I'm thinking, probably came, I don't remember what happened in this case, but I'm thinking her mom probably, or my mom's friend probably came back and saw that I was gone. It was like, what the shit? And that was the hardest part of the storm, was just getting through that experience of that tree crash landing on us. And we had pictures, and I swear my dad made copies and gave them to me, and if I do have them, I really don't know. They're mixed up into something or other, but we took pictures of this big tree laying across the roof. And my dad and this guy that was dating the woman that lived in number 3, they went up on the roof and started in the storm. And my mom's like, "You're gonna get yourself killed." Of course, and we all ended up just congregating to my friend Megan's house. My place where I lived is just empty. We all just kind of hung out there and rode the storm out together. And again, the worst part was that first hour. After that, it was mostly, 70 mile an hour, but the damage was done, at least in our area. But yeah, my dad and this guy are up on the roof, and they were sawing branches off because they were trying to bring down the weight of the tree in case it slipped off the wisteria tree, and all of a sudden the apartment was withstanding the bulk of the weight, and then it might actually cave in. And my dad got so sick from that. The power was out for like 4 days. My dad was sick as hell the whole time. He was just on the couch coughing, and we were just disgusting. None of us could shower. We had barely any food. I remember listening to a Blazer game on the radio because we actually had a radio. One of those kind of old little carry with your radios, not like a boombox, but just like a little, and it would run off D batteries, so we were able to plug a D battery into it and actually get it to work. And I remember, there was a Blazer game, like 2 days after the storm. The city's probably still almost entirely blacked out. It's all just destroyed. But there's a Blazer game in town, and I actually listened to the game on the radio. I remember falling asleep before the game even ended. And yeah, I remember like school was out for almost a week, and we ultimately, I remember the first day school was back in session, we still didn't have power. The school did, a block away, but we didn't have power. My mom didn't let me go to school purely because I hadn't showered. I hadn't bathed myself in like 5-6 days, and she was just like, "I'm not sending my dirty kid to school." I'm thinking that was probably the case for a lot of people whose power was still allowed. Like, you turn the power on, I'll send my kid back to school, but until then, you can go to hell. And it was just crazy, and I remember other neighbors coming over, asking us how things went, what our experience was, in the aftermath of the storm. Once it got to finally be about 7-8 o'clock at night, it just was kind of just windy outside, not really storming anymore, just kind of 23. Every now and then I'd hear a little gust, and I wasn't really traumatized by the wind yet. I was traumatized by the experience, but clearly my youthful mind decided to correlate the sound of the wind with destruction like that. And it was like there was multiple times where if I was over here or over there, right here, I could have gotten seriously injured or killed. And so somehow I put together 2 and 2, endangerment of life and the sound of a brisk wind. And again, that whole freaking winter, it was just windy as hell. And I don't remember how many days later it was, but it wasn't that far, maybe a week or 2 after the storm. So right around Christmas time, Merry Christmas, I was just sitting there. We were watching TV, and there was like a little...
The Lake Oswego house
windy,
burst into a wall of flames and
10-15 mile an hour
collapsed on the
breeze.
front lawn.
And
It
I
was
looked
less
out the
than 2
window,
minutes
and I'm
after a
just
Lake
like,
Oswego...
Is there another storm about to happen? My parents are like, no, it's just a little windy outside. And a couple minutes later, I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, yeah, there's no storm. And like, I just kept asking them over and over again. And all of a sudden I realized I couldn't even trust what they were saying. You start seeing branches sway in the breeze. You start seeing all these things that happen every day, but happen during the storm. You start to correlate them with the storm. And the trauma just overtook me and stayed with me. Because again, this was like 3 months, give or take, into my 4th grade year. And it wasn't until the end of 5th grade, start of 6th grade, that I finally got over it. So for like a year and a half, we're talking 10-15 mile an hour winds, just utter shock, complete and total fear, crippled by fear. And I remember I'd have to ask the teacher, because I would get constantly distracted because I sat in a desk right next to a window, and there were 2 trees outside, and the moment they started rustling in the breeze, I'd start panicking. I had horrible stomach aches. I had stomach aches all the time from the anxiety, and it's frightening. You feel like, as the months go by, you feel like this is going to be you for the rest of your life. And I feel like that kind of started that anxiety, because I still kind of have that, with my headaches and my dry eye, as it takes as long as it has for things to be effective, you start wondering, am I going to have to deal with this for the rest of my life? It's stressful, even if it isn't like a life altering disease or something. And I feel like that really started with that windstorm, that concept of something showing up, not going away after a couple of days, and you wondering, am I going to feel like this for the rest of my life? I would constantly be wearing earplugs at home, constantly having the curtains closed at home so I couldn't see. I did the same thing at school. My 4th grade teacher, Miss Pyle, the greatest human being ever to live. My parents came to school, or my dad dropped me off at school one talking, and I was like, so Steve's got this fear of the wind now, would it be cool if he asked to close the curtains if the wind starts blowing? And she was like, oh, hell yeah. And so I would sometimes have to go to her and just be like, the wind's scaring me, and she'd be like, all right, close the curtains. And I think the fear overcame any sense of embarrassment, so I wasn't really embarrassed as the standout kid that would be closing the curtains all the time, even though I was incredibly self-conscious at the time. Yeah, so my life revolved. I watched the Weather Channel obsessively. The Weather Channel became a daily thing for me, because I'd be watching to hear them say how windy is it going to be today. I started recording the Weather Channel so that I could reference it back. It was obsessive. I kid you not. And it was just, I remember one day I came home, my mom was taking a nap, and I was just alone. And there was it was another breezy day, 30-mile-an-hour gusts, something like that. And I stood at the window. I opened the curtains and stood at the window, and I'm just praying to God to make the wind stop. And I swear, every time I did a little prayer of some kind, of course I had no church-going experience, I didn't really know how to pray. It was just please God, make this stop. Every time I kind of did a little, minute of prayer here, the wind would kind of stop for a minute, and then it would come back, and I'd be like, no, please God, please. And then it would kind of stop again for a minute. I don't know if that was my prayers being answered or a coincidence. So yeah, just real messed up. And I remember finally one day I was hanging with my friend Jason. He came over, and he was gonna have to go home in a couple of minutes, and I was gonna walk him out. It's dark out now. Again, this is end of 5th grade. I think it was near the end of 5th grade, and there was, it was breezy outside, 30-40-mile-an-hour gusts. It was windy outside, and he went outside, and I went outside with him, and I saw the wind, and I was like, yeah, dude, I'm afraid of the wind. And he was just kind of like, fuck it, man. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, fuck this. And I just stared at the wind. I stepped out into the courtyard so the wind could actually hit me, and I was like, give me your best shot. And I finally realized this ain't nothing to be afraid of. And from that night on, that faded off and was gone. And now I actually get some, if there's a big windstorm coming in now, vlogger, amateur, historian, I want to be out there in that mess. I mean, not if these trees are tipping they're going to land on my head, then obviously I'm going to find a safe place. But now it's when crazy weather stuff happens, I actually want to be out there experiencing it. A tale of 2 different people. And it was just, it's such a freaking experience. And it really did kind of symbolize the end of my youthful innocence. Life was pretty easy up to that point. The summer of 1995, my mom's friend, the one who abandoned me to move her car, she was staying with us for the summer, and her daughter came and stayed with us, and we kind of bonded. We both liked basketball, stuff like that. She ended up cultivating this very bizarre relationship with the older brother of this girl I knew up the street, and it was just we were constantly hanging out. It was like my friend Jason always went away to visit his dad during the summer. So the summer was always kind of a bummer for me, but we had all this other stuff going on. It was just, I just remember it just being so much fun. And it was like, you know, I'm 9 years old, almost 10. My parents are both working, but I'm hanging out with like this girl that's a little bit older than me because she's my mom's friend's daughter, and she's like 12. And so I got to like go around and roam around town with them a lot more, and there was kind of a sense of independence. And then, you know, 4th grade, I did great in 4th grade. I loved 4th grade, aside from the wind problems. And then that windstorm happened, and the trauma happened. And, you know, while that was happening, I was seeing the first signs of my parents' marriage kind of crumbling. While it took them another 12 years to finally start making the move to separate, this was where it really started. And, you know, I started to see my dad become more and more just unbearable to be around. He became more and more obsessed with his activism as opposed to like working and keeping a stable roof over our heads. You know, getting our phones, getting our cable, getting our power shut off, all the stuff became just more and more of a common occurrence. I started watching my mom get more and more depressed, doing less with her life, slipping into the bottle a little bit more. You know, even moving from this apartment we lived in forever where the storm happened into a house. We actually got a house together, and we thought that was going to kind of revitalize our family a little bit, and that worked for about, I don't know, half a year. But you know, you relocate somewhere when you have problems, and the problems aren't just going to go away. Never works out that way, even though people constantly think it will. And you know, things just got worse and worse. Home life got more and more stressful, and really that windstorm was the beginning of the end of that just sense of adolescent fun and freedom that you have as a little kid. Sometimes, you know, some kids unfortunately grow up and you know, from the moment they're born, they never have that. So I'm still obviously grateful that I did have something like that for a while. But that was really the beginning of the end. That big storm, the triggering of the anxiety, and then just life at home just kind of getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. But that experience, you know, affected me so much more than the flood of '96 ever could, because nothing really happened to us. That was probably the closest I've ever felt to thinking in the moment that I was going to die, which is pretty frightening for a 10-year-old kid to not just having to experience feelings like that at all, but having to experience them so all of a sudden. It was like when I was walking to the door to leave school, it was like, all right, storm's coming, whatever, I don't know. And then by the time I'm home, 5 minutes later, I'm like, Mom, I have to save myself. We're all gonna die. It's a wild experience. I mean, it was a major historically significant experience. Again, overshadowed by the flood of '96 that you know, affected a lot of people, but it was a major experience during that time. We hadn't had a storm like that really since the Columbus Day storm, you know, some 33 years earlier. So, in addition to being a event that affected me personally, it was a major historical weather event that happened. You know, it happened all up and down the Pacific Northwest. I'm, you know, mostly just talking about, you know, my little corner of the world, but that was definitely, you know, I've had traumatic events like everybody else, but that was definitely the windstorm, that tree landing on the house and not knowing what was going on, that, you know, 10-15 minutes between getting home and running across the street to Sanctuary, which that became a running thing. I started going over to Megan's house all the time, or apartment all the time, because no trees fell on their apartment. I was able to escape there. That was my escape place. So it was therapeutic for me to go over there, because that's where I rode out the rest of the storm. And hey, nothing really bad happened there after I left our apartment. So when the wind started blowing, I was on the phone asking to go over to Megan's place. And I remember, I think her dad was a dickhead though. He started getting kind of sick of me coming over all the time, but that was the thing during that year and a half period, was that was my safe place. That was my safe haven, so I wanted to go over there all the time. But yeah, so I mean, all in all, that period, that moment in my life, I think definitely the most traumatic experience of my life. From the iconic December 12th, 1995 windstorm of 95. Whew. Glad I survived it. I didn't die like I thought I was going to. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me on that story, and it's a good thing I'm bringing it to an end, because now I'm getting to the louder area with cars passing by, Maxes departing, and as always, Guy, remember, Guy, hey Guy, as always, guys and gals, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit my Patreon if you so choose, all that stuff, all that fun stuff. And till next time, from the heart, this has been Steve the Amateur Historian, and I will see you next time.